Hello and welcome to this short presentation on Broadgate Hospital, what was the East Riding of Yorkshire County Pauper Lunatic Asylum. What I'm going to do is say a little bit about the place and also about some of the records you might find and some of the people who could have been involved in the asylum itself. So Broadgate Hospital itself was built on land previously owned by Broadgate Farm, and it was located to the northeast of Walkington Village. That's between Walkington and Beverley in the East Riding of Yorkshire. It opened on the 25th of October 1871 and it closed in 1989, and very little of it remains now. When I'm looking at a place for the first time, I often see if I can find a Victoria County history that will give me a starting point. Unfortunately, although there is one for Beverley, there's very little about it, about the hospital itself. And I was really lucky to be able to find this book by Curry, Across the Westwood, The Life and Times of Broadgate Hospital. And that helped me understand the place a bit more and gave me a better sense of what happened there. The map is one from the National Library of Scotland's map collection, a really great resource. It was published in 1893, and I think you can see behind my head that the place itself was in quite a rural area, surrounded by trees and what have you. So definitely not a city centre asylum. And when you're looking at asylums, there are a number of different records that you might find helpful. So you could find some information about it on the county asylums list. Asylums had to produce annual reports. The Wellcome collection have got quite a lot that have been digitised, and also you can find them in local archives and county record offices. Asylums were also visited regularly by the commissioners in lunacy, and some of their reports are available as well, and you may well find some images on Wikimedia Commons and in the Wellcome collection. The bit on the right is a report of the Committee of the Visitors for the North Riding of Yorkshire, and this was presented in 1869. So now this was just before East Riding opened their own asylum. Before that date, East Riding patients would have been in the joint asylum for the North and East Ridings of Yorkshire. That's in Clifton near York. So I just wanted to point out a few things that you might spot. So this little bit of extract is from the Commissioners in Lunacy, and it talks about frequent concerts, lectures and readings. Dr. Christie has organised a brass band. Dr. Christie was actually the medical superintendent at the time. The game of croquet has been introduced. The case books and other medical records are now properly kept. But then the next thing is about a female patient who had a fracture, and that one of the things that hadn't previously been reported was that the nurse had effectively tied her by a handkerchief around the waist to a heavy chair, and when she ran across the room she fell and broke her arm. So you can find quite a lot of interesting information about how they were run, how asylums were run in both the commissioners in lunacy reports and in their asylum annual reports, which were often reported on in the local newspapers as well. So another great site. Now, one of the things that I find quite interesting when I was researching East Riding was the number of medical superintendents they had in the first 30 years. So you had Dr. Neil Gray Mercer, and that is spelt correctly, he's Scottish, and he trained in Edinburgh, and he was there when it opened, but he died in uncertain circumstances on the 1st of January 1877. He was then replaced by Dr. Richard Green, who was really only there for less than 2 years, and then Dr. Whitcomb, who was also only there for a short period of time. He in fact went back to Birmingham and ran the Birmingham County Asylum. And then the man that was there for quite a significant amount of time was Dr. MacLeod, and he was there until 1906 when he retired. Now, when I was researching them, obviously useful things are census records, vital records, that sort of thing. But I also discovered 2 collections on ancestry, medical registers and medical directories. And the last job I had before I retired was to run a career service for doctors. And I was particularly interested in the medical directories because they give you a snapshot of someone's career at any one time. They tell you where that doctor is at that moment in time, what his previous roles were, and one of the other interesting things is whether or not they've published any papers or been involved in any significant symposiums. And the other source which I found really useful were local newspapers, because they often helped to trace the changes in those people in asylums. I wouldn't have found Dr. Mercer by just looking through the census, because he wasn't there for a census. So there's quite a lot of stuff out there that makes it helpful to find people, I think it's fair to say. But of course, the asylums were set up for the patients. And searching for a patient in a lunatic asylum, as I say, you can use the usual things: census records, newspaper reports, death notices, inquests, that sort of thing. Vital records. I think burials can be quite interesting. I'll come on to that in a bit. But one of the things that is available if you have an account with Ancestry is the lunacy patients admission registers, and that is basically a copy of the admissions registers for patients when they move from asylum to asylum. You can also get things like casebooks, admission orders, etc. Often for those you need to go to a county record office or a local archive, you need to sort of check which was the most useful. But the admission registers on Ancestry can be very helpful. They don't give you a huge amount of information, but they do tell you the name, whether they were a private or a pauper patient, and their gender, when they were admitted to an asylum and which one, and then when they were discharged. Now, the thing to bear in mind that there's 4 possible ways they could have been discharged. They could have been discharged recovered, relieved of their symptoms, or not improved, or death. Because obviously, and if it's death, then you obviously get date of death as well, which is helpful. And I've got a few examples of patients that I want to show you. The image on the right is actually the St Martin's burial ground in Beverley, and that is possibly where this young lady would have been buried. So Jane Holframan, she was a pauper and a female patient. She was admitted on the 24th of May 1877 to the East Riding Asylum, and she died on the 12th of June 1877. I looked up to see if I could find out where she'd been buried, and she did die at the asylum. Obviously it gives you your age, so that helps you if you're wanting to find somebody, and she was buried in Beverley, somewhere in this burial ground on the right hand side. The second patient that I'm going to introduce you to is someone called New Love Smith. He had a number of records in the Ancestry collection. His first record shows that he was a pauper and a male patient, and he was admitted to the North and East Riding Asylum in Clifton on the 20th of September 1851. He was discharged relieved on the 25th of October 1871, and he's one of a group of patients who were transferred to Broadgate Hospital. So there's entry on the right is his admission information for Broadgate. So it says, it confirms that he was admitted on 25th of October 1871 and that he was in the East Riding, and it tells us that he was discharged on the 31st of August 1901, which is when he died, and he died at the asylum at the age of 77. He's buried in Walkington Churchyard. That's the parish churchyard in the middle, somewhere in here, and he according to his burial record, he was born about 1824. He actually probably spent the best part of 50 years in either the North and East Riding Asylum, later to be called the North Riding one, in Clifton on the outskirts of York, or in Broadgate. The third and last patient is someone who's actually an ancestor of mine. Lucy was married to John Silversides, my second cousin 5 times removed, and I actually found information for her in the Broadgate Asylum casebook in the East Riding of Yorkshire Archives. She was said to be 50 when she entered the asylum on the 1st of March 1887. I do have her baptism record, and she was actually baptised on the 3rd of May 1840. She wasn't at all well. She was in a poor state, she had mania, and she was said to talk to herself. And despite a diet of butter, eggs and milk with brandy, her health deteriorated. She died only a few days later, less than 2 weeks later, on the 30th of March 1887, and she was actually buried in Wickle Churchyard, which is the church on the left, where her family came from. So she's a really good example of somebody who wasn't buried in the located with other asylum patients. So last but not least, just some final thoughts. In terms of places, you may well to look at the County Asylum list, the Wellcome Collection, the National Library of Scotland Maps Collection, Wikimedia Commons for images, county record offices and local archives, local history society, or publications about the place. When it comes to patients, I've introduced you to the UK lunacy patients admissions registers on Ancestry, and you can use them to find someone even when they only had a short stay in an asylum. County record offices, local archives will have admission registers, case books, etc. And obviously you can enhance the information you find with census records, vital records, local newspapers, and burials. Where was the patient buried? Certainly something to consider. Thank you for listening.